For the first part, we're going to work on the handles to the bag. This is a 5-inch metal gold ring. The brand is this. I got these a while ago from Joann Fabrics, so I'm sure you can find them online somewhere, or you can find something similar that you might want to use. And we're going to just simply crochet around the ring so it ends up looking like this one, like you saw in the beginning with the bag. So we're just going to simply work our way around doing this, and I'm going to show you how to start it first. So you're going to do your slip knot. Give yourself a little bit of a tail for at the end when we go to close off this part of the project. You got your crochet hook. Place your yarn on it. Make it a little snug if you want. Now what you want to do is you want to have the working yarn behind the ring. Your tail can be in front if you want. You're not even going to be doing anything with that for a little while. So you want the working yarn behind the ring. So let me zoom in here so you can see better what I'm doing. Okay, so once you have that behind it, you're going to take your crochet hook, reach down and grab that working yarn and bring it up. And then you're going to go ahead and you're going to rewrap it, and go through the two. Okay, you do the same thing. This is my working yarn. I'm going down, I'm grabbing it, bringing it up, and then I'm rewrapping it and going through both. And your tail, just kind of leave it alone. We'll be using that at the end to help bind it off. So I'm just going to kind of move this out of my way. And that's all you're going to do. See how my working yarn is kind of behind it? And then I've reached back for it, bring it up. Then I'm rewrapping and I'm going all the way through. So I'm just going to work this process all the way around until I get it as snugly around this as I can. So as you can see, we're kind of building our chains around it. So we're just going, yarn is behind it, kind of rolling over it, got it up, rewrap, bring both of those through. And if you notice that your yarn split, like see right here, that kind of split, that's with the other loop, so you kind of want to go back through and make sure you get all of it. And then again, we got our working yarn kind of laying over the top, but we're reaching for the back. So it looks like this. You're rewrapping it, and you're working that through both loops. And that's all you're going to do, is you're kind of working your way around the ring in the same process. And as you're doing it, you kind of want to just check. You want them to be kind of close together. If you look here, there's some wiggle room, but there's not a lot for them to move. And you kind of want to have it as many around this as you can, just to kind of keep them from moving too much. So again, I've got my working yarn laying over that, but I'm reaching from the behind. And I'm rewrapping and pulling it all the way through. That's all I'm going to do all the way around this ring. And keep in mind, if it struggles you, it could be that it's trying to do, it's not going through. There we go. Now it will wiggle, so it's not going to stay totally flat. As you see, it's going to wiggle, but you can kind of line it up. And that's what we're doing. And we're just going to want to make sure it's as tight as we can around the ring. So I'm going to go and I'm going to continue working this, around until I get ready to close it up. And then I'll come back and I'll show you how I kind of tied it off, which is right here, which will be hiding when we do the actual project. So again, continue working your way around, and I'll meet you back here when it's close to tying this off so we can move on to the next step. Okay, once you're getting close to where you don't have too much of a gap, you're going to want to keep going, like I said, until you get as tight as you can, as many loops as you can around the project. And again, working this off camera is a lot faster than on camera, just because of the way I'm holding it. So we're just going to do a couple more here. Kind of seeing how much space we have in between. Keeping that original tail off to the side as much as possible. Okay, so once you're comfortable with how many loops you have on there, again, this will wiggle, so like it's not meant to be firmly in place. It will kind of wiggle, which can also make it more wavy of a pattern if you wanted. But again, I got a good amount on there just to kind of help cover the metal ring, and now it's kind of, I want to join, the beginning where we started and the end together in order to lock this in place. And this is where your tail is going to come in handy. So the first thing I'm actually going to do is cut this tail to give myself some, because I don't need that much working yarn again. So I'm just going to cut that tail, move your yarn out of the way, and again we have the two tails. So what I want to do right now is I want to grab both these tails and put them both through this one loop I have right now, just to kind of help join, the back and the front together. Now what you can do here is we're going to kind of separate them again. Okay, so after we put it through the loop, we got them separated again. We're going to take our crochet hook and bring one of these strands through one side over here. My yarn frayed. Let's try that again. It doesn't quite matter where, but you're going to grab one, bring it through over here, take this one, and then find a spot on this side. Put your crochet through hook through a spot, grab that, your tail, pull it through. Now go ahead and tie these two together as tight as you can, just to kind of help, again, bring the beginning and the end together. So I'm just tying them together, and as you see, it kind of creates it locks them in place. Now if you want to, you can take your leftover tails and kind of put them through the project a little bit before you trim them. Okay, if you want to make sure it's secure, you can do the same thing, just kind of working them through again. And then if you want, you can give them another tie. As tight as you can without breaking your yarn. And then once you're pretty much all set, you can go ahead and trim it. And that helps our handle be locked in. So now we have our two handles done, and we're now able to move on to the next step. This is using the 36 peg Nifty Knitter loom that I had on hand. If you don't have this loom, you might be able to adjust this pattern using a different loom that's similar to this in size. Because it's going to be more like a pouch type bag, you really just want a circle loom that has enough pegs. We're going to keep the design very, very simple if we can, just so that way if you do need to transfer this over, it's a little, hopefully, easier to do. But now what we need to do is we actually need to set up the tabs we want to do to attach these right into the bag at the beginning. So what you're going to end up doing is you're going to end up making little tabs that will hook these onto the loom, so then when we continue the purse, these two handles will actually be dangling off your project, which may be a little strange in the beginning, but when you see how they attach on pretty good and makes it a little more secure, it's better, I feel, to attach the handles right at the beginning. So what you're going to want to do, and if you need to, you can grab some stitch markers if you need to. So what you want to do is, I'm looking at this loom, with the peg. I like this, having a peg that sticks out. It lets me know when I'm back to the beginning a little easier. But we're going to use this as a way to determine where we want to start our tabs. So I'm going to go over and I'm just going to pick a spot, and whatever spot I pick on one side, I want to mirror that on the other. But we're only going to work one at a time. So again, I'm going to turn this so I'm looking at half the loom, and I'm going to decide to work my tab for my attachment of them right here. Now, what I need to do is I need to quickly grab another strand of yarn because I need to double up my yarn on this loom. So hang on one second. Okay, so now that I have, two strands of this mint yarn, I'm going to attach them on there. Now you may or may not want a row counter as well, so that you can remember how many you did on each side. Basically what we're doing is almost like making mini little ear flaps that we can use to attach this with. So I have this sideways, I want to come over and I'm thinking right about here, I want my tab, so I'm going to use, probably, let me see. Best thing to do is, visually for you guys, would be to set some sort of thing. I'm going to start here, and I believe 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, I'm going to end there. So I'm working across 5 different pegs. I'm hoping you can see those stitch markers. I'm working 5 pegs. So if you're starting over here, you're coming over 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. On the 8th peg, drop a stitch marker if you need to. Then count this one, so that'd be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Drop your next stitch marker. Excuse me. Now, I need my looming tool. Everything's far away from me in this video for some reason today. Okay. So we're just going to do the E-wrap cast on. We're not going to be too picky. We're going to try to keep our tail a little shorter, just so we can kind of hide it better. Do our slip knot. Again, with nip knitters, unless you're making a very open weave bag, you're going to most likely want to double up. This yarn, again, if I didn't mention, is a weight of 4, so I'm using 2 weights of 4 yarn right now. And we're just going to tighten it. Now what we want to kind of do is hide this tail if we can in as we go this time. Alright, so we're going to wrap over to the net. We got 1 peg, 2, 3, 4, and 5. And now we're going to work our way back. And we're just doing E-wrap to make it as simple, and then we're just going to knit over these to get our cast on row done. Try to be careful of how tight you wrap things, because otherwise you'll end up having a little too much tension on it. Okay. Now what I want you to do is we're just going to, like I said, we're keeping it very simple for these tabs. We're going to keep it with straight E-wrap, and we're going to do another row. 1, all the way over. And remember, I tend to skip this one because I start wrapping with the second one in, and then I knit over. Okay. And you can, if you have a row counter like this, just go ahead and click it so you can remember, because again, you want to do the same thing on the other side when we're done. So again, just work your way back. As you can see, when I'm taking the yarn, up, I'm just kind of going right to the next peg. You could choose to do garter if you wanted and alternate the rows. It's up to you. Again, I wanted this to be simple. Okay, and knit over. And that's all I'm going to keep doing until I get the tab part, which is the side on this side, down to where I want it. So I'm going to go off camera and work a few more rows, and we're going to come back after we've done this many rows right here, and I'll show you how we're going to attach it. After completing the 5 rows, your project should be looking like this, and now we come to the simple task of adding the rings to be our handles. If you want, try to find the part where we close them off and lay that in first. And again, your working yarn, keep that out of the way. Now basically take and wrap it around. Now you're not going to be able to stretch it out across the 5 pegs. You're probably going to be able to stretch it across these 3. Okay, so it's okay that they don't attach to all of them. You're just going to reattach them, just like if you were doing a brim. Just go ahead and reattach that first row, onto it. Remember, your first row also has that working tail yarn, so you may have more strands. But go ahead and go and do that. You just bring them back up onto the loops, and then just simply knit them over again, just across the 3 in the middle. Now what we're doing is we're locking them in place, keeping our working yarn off to the side so it doesn't get caught, in the project. Again, this is just my little tail from the beginning. Okay, and push that down, and that locked our handle into one side of the project, and it will kind of lay down like, let me come back here. It will just kind of hang off as you're working the rest of your project, but that makes it already attached in the project, and it may have a little wiggle room, may not. Now we need to do the same process on the other side. So go ahead and trim your yarn, leave a little bit of working tail because we're going to work this into the project a little bit, so just leave yourself a little bit of a working tail on this side, and then simply switch over and do the same process on this side. So again, we came 8 from the, we could take off the stitch markers. We're not going to need them on the other side anymore right now. So you can take them, so you can do the same thing. Here's our little starter peg. We counted 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, and you would drop your stitch marker. Then 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, drop your stitch marker. So work that same that we did on this side, and again, cut the working yarn because we're going to start at our starting point when we're done. So go ahead and first put the other handle on this side, doing the 5 rows, and then we'll come back and we'll start the main part of the bag. So again, you will cut your working tail like we did before, and I will see you back here for the next part. Once you finish attaching the handles, they will obviously hang down as you're working on the rest of the project, and they shouldn't be too much in your way. I've done this idea before. Now what we want to do is we want to work around the whole loom now in order to, again, fully lock the handles into the project. I'm going to use 2 strands, again, of the mint green before I switch over to different colors. And we're going to count this as our starting peg, and I always just do a slip knot right on the first peg. Just keep in mind when you're going to knit over that you're going to have more loops on obviously those 5 pegs. But I'm just going to drop it down. You can choose to work this all as one when you wrap, or let it hang down and weave it in later. Sometimes it's easier just to weave it in later, so I might just do that. I'm going to take the tails and just kind of move them off to the side. And we're just going to do, pretty much kind of like an E-wrap cast on. However, we're going to wrap the pegs once, and where there is already going to be 2 loops, we'll knit those over now. And again, we'll hide these out of the way, and we will hide these and trim these later in the project if need be. So I'm going to go and I'm going to wrap, but when I hit these here, I'm going to automatically knit them over. So I'm still going to have to go around twice before the whole loom is casted on. So we're going to go ahead and do that. Again, I'm just going to wrap going around. And once I hit these that I already have loops on them, I'm going to make sure that the stragglers are out of my way. Once I hit these, I'm going to go ahead and already knit these over. You could choose to do a U-knit on these to make it tighter, and I may actually do that. Let's backtrack. Let's actually do the U-knit on these, which is a little tighter stitch. And then we're going to do U-knit on the next. Okay, and we're just going to do the U-knit on those pegs right there that have 2. So again, when you U-knit, you're not completely wrapping it around. I have videos about that. Okay, and again, U-knit here. Making sure you get both strands. Okay, U-knit here. Now again, just go ahead and wrap till you get to the other section here that has the pegs already having loops on it. So just go ahead and E-wrap over. And again, once we get to the ones that have loops already on them, we're going to do the U-knit for those. And another U-knit. And 2 more here. And another U-knit. And last one. Now again, keep wrapping till you get to the beginning again. Now, I want to keep up with doing the U-knit because it's a little bit tighter stitch than doing, the E-wrap knit. If we were to do a flat knit, we'd be laying it across, and again, that would even be tighter. But I'm figuring the U-knit is a good in between the E-wrap knit and doing a flat knit. So that's why we're going to do the U-knit. We're going to do that all the way around until we get to our starting peg again. So go ahead and continue that process of doing the U-knit all the way around the loom until you get back to your starting point. Again, with the U-knit, just going like that. Get my hand out of the way so I'm just wrapping, I'm not fully wrapping it. Again, you're wrapping it, creating kind of a U, but you're not fully wrapping it. So go ahead and continue this until you get all the way back to your starting peg. After you complete going around with the U-knit stitch, now I want to do the purl stitch. This is to kind of have a little bit of like a way to keep it from curling too much at the top of the bag. So again, with purl stitch, we're just going to lay our working yarn on below the loops that are on there, and then we're just going to simply take our looming tool, go through the loop, so we can grab our working yarn, making sure we grab both strands if you're using 2 strands of yarn. Turn it so you can create a loop, and then take this loop again, making sure you got both sets of string, and pull it off and put it back on the peg. And then do the same thing. Take your tool through the loop, move your working yarn over underneath it, kind of turn to grab it and make a new loop and put that loop on your peg. So go ahead and work your way all the way around doing the purl stitch till you get back to the beginning. So go ahead and do that, and I will meet you back at the beginning. Once you get back to the beginning, having finished that purl, what I want you to do now is the following. We're going to repeat this process again. So you're going to go ahead and do a row of unit, and then a row of purl, and then go ahead and repeat that process 2 more times after that. And then we'll come back and we'll be ready to move on to the main part of the bag. Once you complete that part, what we're going to do now is switch from this kind of minty green color to using 2 strands of other colors. We got this one, which has kind of got a mixture of a kind of like a green, a little hint of like blue and like tan throughout it, and I thought it'd be really pretty. And we're also going to go and use this kind of orangey coralish kind of color as well. I don't know the specific names of them, but I'm sure you could find something similar to them for Red Heart, because I believe they both were Red Heart brands. So what we need to do is we need to find, okay, that goes, what's that one? Just trying to make sure they're lined up, because you're going to take these 2 and you're going to reattach them, excuse me, where these green ones are. We need to remove this and put this on. And all I usually like to do is just simply tie one to the other. So I got this set up over here to be adding to it, and I need my scissors, and we're going to cut it. This this part, we'll weave in the ends later. I'm going to cut here, get rid of that yarn out of our way, and now we're going to take these 2 new colors together. And this might be a slightly different thickness, but see, those 2 colors will kind of work nice together. And we're going to go ahead and we're going to tie it to these existing ones and try to get as close down by the peg as you can when you tie it, because it'll make it easier when you are wrapping the pegs if there's not as much give. So we're going to wrap it and we're going to tie it as close to the peg as we can. Not too tight, we want to make sure we can still knit that over. I usually double knot it, and I will hide this into the project when it's done. You can use a crochet hook and weave in your ends. So move all that to the inside of the bag, excuse me, and then like I said, we're going to work these 2 colors. I'm going to turn these a little bit, hopefully they will. Okay, just give myself a little slack on those. Now what we're going to do is we're going to do the chunky braid stitch. What that means is I'm going to wrap these pegs around, so there's technically 4 sets of loops on a peg. However, it's actually easier, excuse me, this is considered 1 set of loops on the pegs. I'm going to go around 2 more times so that I have 3, and then what I like to do is actually work the 4th 1 peg at a time, because I have to knit with the chunky braid stitch. You're knitting 3 loops over 1, and you have to be careful when we're using double yarn to get both that are considered in that loop. So that's why it's going to be easier to work this 1 peg at a time after you get the initial rows wrapped. So again, we want to end up having 3 of these wrapped on here, so we're just basically wrapping around the loom like this. Keep an eye on your tension. You don't want to wrap too tight, otherwise it's going to be harder to knit these over when we end up doing the chunky braid stitch. So I'm keeping it very loose through my finger, just kind of letting it glide, not forcing it to be tight on the pegs. As you come back to the beginning, again, we're going to wrap again. So you're going to really need to keep track of your sets of loops. So you're going to gently push these out of your way to make it a little easier to rewrap again. So gently push these down. And you're going to do the same thing, you're going to wrap again. This time we'll have our 3 sets of loops on there. And you can kind of move it down as you go along. Again, watching your tension, keeping it as loose as you can with it still being wrapped around. Give yourself some slack on the yarn and just gently work your way around. Okay, as we come around to getting ready to do the last what we have to do, this is where I like to work one peg at a time. So again, we're going to end up taking these 3 bottom loops over the new loop we're creating. Again, keep your tension easy to make it as easy as you can. It might be a little struggle in the beginning, but I'm taking all these down here and only going to leave that one on there. So I'm taking all these up and over, making sure that I can get all of the loops at once. And knit it over. Then go ahead and move on to the next. You wrap it and then take all the bottom ones and making sure you grab all of them. Oops, not losing the one you're trying to keep on there, and knit it over. So if you need to, go ahead and push all these down. Okay, and that's, again, you're going to work it one peg at a time because it's typically the easiest way to do it. Making sure you get all those loops. Alright, so what you're going to do is you're going to continue that, working one peg at a time, and then you'll be left, as you can see, with just the one set of loops on again. So go ahead and complete the chunky braid stitch for this many rows, and then we'll be ready to move on to another part. After completing the 22 rows of the chunky braid stitch, you can really see how the bag is coming through. We're going to work on these stragglers that you see here related to the handle and to the bag. We'll work them at the end after we're taken off off the project. Unless you wanted to work them in now, you can go ahead and do that. But again, we're going to tackle that after it's off the loom, and that's when we're going to attach the buttons as well. So now what we want to do is I want to do a few rows of the U-knit just before I take this off the loom. Right now it's got a nice thickness. I will say this, if you've never done the chunky braid stitch, it is a thicker type of stitch, which is kind of nice. And as you can see, you can kind of give it a little stretch to it. So I'm going to go ahead, but I want to make sure the bottom of the bag, I'm just going to do the U-knit, because this chunky braid stitch, when we take it off as gathered, it might bunch up a little more than you may like. So we're going to do a more simple stitch for the bottom of the bag. And again, it's probably, it's not as long as you think. I mean, my hand, it's not meant to be a huge bag, but if you want it to be longer, obviously continue with the chunky braid stitch for a few more rows until you get the length that you want, and then go ahead and switch over to the U-knit that we're going to do. So again, with the U-knit, it's very simple. We're not doing a flat knit. I don't want it to be that tight. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to do the U-knit where I come around like halfway basically, so it looks kind of like a U, and then knit over like we did in the beginning. And we're going to do this stitch until we're ready to take it off the loom. So you're just going to work one peg at a time doing the U-knit and this before we take it off. So again, go ahead and do the U-knit around the loom this many times, and then we'll be ready to take it off. After doing 14 rows of the U-knit, I want to go ahead and do 3 rows of purl before we take this off, because I want the stitches to be a little looser. The U-knit, this is a little tighter stitch, as you can see when you're working it up. That's my U-knit right there, and that's the chunky braid stitch we were doing. And this is kind of how it looks on the other side, going from chunky to the U-knit. But we're going to do, like I said, 3 rows of purl just to kind of loosen this up a little bit before we actually take it off the loom. I realized that that would probably be the better thing to do. And I've got my buttons ready, and I've got my crochet hook ready, so that after we do this, we can move on to just finishing up the bag. So again, with purl, we're just going to go and do our loop. You know, bring our looming tool through the loop, put the working yarn underneath it, turn it, turn it, and create our new loop, and put that on the peg. Remove the old and put the new on. Just watch your tension, because you, like I said, you don't want to pull too tight. You just want to kind of work one peg at a time, creating your loop, taking the old one off, and putting the new one on, and gently tightening it, but again, not too tight. So go ahead and work around this loom, doing 3 complete rows of purl. After completing the 3 rows of purl, what we're going to do is we're going to now take it off the loom, and I'm doing it a slightly different way. So I gotta backtrack here a minute, ahead of myself. We are going to do like the drawstring bind off. This way we don't have to have another set of yarn. We're going to use the working yarn we already are using on the loom. But what you can do is, to make sure that you have enough, is go around your loom completely. Around. This is just a way to see how much you need. Now sometimes you can go around twice. I actually went around 3 times because it always feels better to have too much to work with than not enough. So you go around it and then you cut your working yarn, and then this this is the only yarn we're going to be using right now. So let me unwind here. Now to do this bind off, you're going to just basically work one peg at a time. We're going to start with our first peg, and we're going to go in like we're doing a purl, and we're going to bring our tail all the way through. Okay, and then we're going to do that to the second peg. Work it all the way through. Now you can take these loops off as you work, but I want to keep the first loop on there until we're done, because we're going to go back through that loop at the end. So keep your first loop on the first peg you started. But if you had wanted to, you could take them off as you're going, but I'm going to go as far as I can before I worry about taking them off. Again, I'm just working through each loop. Okay, we're about halfway through the loom. I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to come back and I'm going to take off some of these pegs. I'm going to actually leave the first 2 ones on there just for right now to help help it stay on the loom. But I'm going to go ahead and remove the other ones before we work the other half of the loom. You do want to be careful that these don't pop off over here. That's again why I'm leaving a couple on there instead of just the one. And normally I'd be having this hanging down, so because it's a pretty thick bag, so you're going to be holding it up and the bag will probably be hanging, and it will be a little easier to do. So I'm just removing all those. I'll leave that one on there, and now I'll work the other half of the loom. Again, you can work a few and then go back for those other ones and just knit them over, or remove them from the peg. Okay, now I can tell we're done with that row, or excuse me, back almost to the beginning, so let's go ahead and remove these final ones back here. Okay, and then we're going to put it through these last two ones. Okay, now what we're going to do before we actually remove these three, I need to quickly get my other tools ready, and then we'll go ahead and remove these. So I will be right back. Now we're ready to take these last three loops off. I've went ahead and got a crochet hook, I got my buttons, and I got a pair of scissors ready. So you may want them ready as well. So we're going to take that all the way off. Now we remove the loom, and you will have a very, very long tail, obviously. You'll be able to trim that in a little bit. Now, just like we normally do a hat, we're going to make this bag go inside out if we can, to make it easier to bind off. So I'm going to take the loops and just kind of work them through, and I'm going to work this inside out. I'm going to go off camera and make it inside out. It's a little hard to work on camera sometimes when you want to do that. Okay. So once you got your project inside out, as carefully as you can, you're going to go ahead and we're going to pull this tail that we have to close off the bag. So you can see the magic. See how we got all our loops on there? And all I'm going to do, I'll try to zoom in here so you can see a little bit better, is I'm pulling this string that we pulled through, and I'm just pulling it as tight as I can so that it closes off this hole as much as possible. If it doesn't close it off all the way, that's okay. We're going to use this extra yarn here to help us close it off more. So as you see, it's pretty much once you're pulling on this, you're closing it all off. And that's what helped about doing the purl stitch. If you see, it wasn't as tight of a stitch to have to pull through as doing the U-knit. So you may want to try that out. But again, we want to make sure it's as close as we can, and we still got a little bit of a gap. So you're gently pulling because you don't want to break your yarn as much as you can. Now because we use two strands, what I'm first going to do, because I do not need all of this, I'm going to cut myself a tail that's probably about 12 inches to 18 inches to work with, so that way I don't get all tangled up in this. But it's better to have too much yarn than not enough when you're binding something off. But that's what I like about the drawstring bind off, because it just uses the yarn that you have. Now what you're going to do is grab your crochet hook. I'm using a G, but you may find a different one works better for you. And again, because we have these two strands, I'm going to actually separate these two. I'm going to use them as separate. And I'm going to go ahead with like the orange, and I'm going to come on this side, and I'm going to go through a loop, just like I would if I was doing the gather bind off, and bring that through all the way. Oops, I got a little fuzzy. And once you do that, go ahead and like tie these together. And that will kind of help start to close off that hole a little more. It's a little hard to see, I know, but let me see if I can get in here a little better. So all I'm doing is I'm using these two to my advantage by kind of going into the bottom of the project, grabbing one of the strands that I've been working with, pulling it all the way through, and then tying it to the other one into like a knot. Now I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to move this one over to here. I'm just kind of working around. There's no really set place, sorry, that you have to do it in. It's just kind of working it around just to kind of get that hole. As you can see, it's closing up even more. So I'm just going to keep doing this until I feel that I've done enough tying it closed, and then I'll do like a double knot to make sure it's secure. And again, I'm going to go over here. I mean, right next to where the bind up is, or even up a little bit, whatever you feel think will work best. I'm not being too picky about where I go, as long as it's close to where the opening is, so that it'll help close it off. Another way you can kind of test if it's getting closed off, just kind of look and say, okay, do I have a gap anywhere? Even put your hand, down through the bag and see if you see any of your fingers popping through the hole. And I don't, but I'm going to do one more loopy-loop of tying this off, and then we'll be ready to kind of do the last finishing touches. So I'm going to separate the yarn again, and I'm going to do one over this way, because if I look, I'm like, well, I could use one right over here just to make sure. Again, I don't want this project to come apart. So then I'm going to grab one of the working tails I already had, come through, and this time, because I don't really need to do any more, I'm going to double knot it, possibly even triple knot. I've done that before. Okay, tie it tight, go ahead and do it again, tie it tight, and you can kind of tug at it to see if your knot is secure. And that's kind of what I do. I like to kind of tie it tight as many times as I can. I'm really obsessive about how many knots sometimes, just because I feel like you don't want it to fall apart. And if you really want it one more time to go through another spot, again, you can go ahead and do that. You can even move the other one to a different spot. Open it. Okay, and then do another couple knots. Okay, and once I feel like I am pretty secure, I will again trim this yarn, leaving just a little bit. And then what you can do if you want is with the tails you have here, you can kind of weave them into the project so that they're kind of hidden. Just picking spots to just kind of hide it in there. And that's all I'm doing. Okay, so that part of the bag is complete, and you can tug on it and we're pretty secure. So we're going to go back and make this the right way before we finish off the other part. So go ahead and just kind of make it back the right way. Okay, now we got to focus on the top of the bag. Okay, so once we do this, it looks a little strange because we've got our U-knit kind of down here, but it makes the bottom of the bag a little more secure and just gives us a little bit of a different design, so we're not seeing the same stitch all the way through. Okay, so I'm just kind of stretching it out. As you can see, we kind of got a interesting shaped bag. It almost looks like a berry. Kind of like, if I did this in red, it would have been like a strawberry shape. Okay, but now we have to work on these handles, so we'll come right back and we'll work on them. Now the main thing we have to do with the rings is just checking that they are secure and basically hiding any stragglers that we see using our crochet hook and scissors if we need to trim. So if you're by the handle right here, you should have a string from when we were, putting it on or when we worked our way around. Just give it a little tug if you want. And if you're worried that it's part of the project, you can go ahead. Again, we use 2 strands, so separate them and then kind of go and find a loop, obviously, and kind of tie it to the project before you trim it if you're worried about it being part of the project a little more. So I usually just do that. I'm going to go ahead, I'm going to do a couple knots here, nothing fancy. Okay, and once I feel that that's secure, I'm going to trim it as close to the project as I can. Now what I'm going to do while I'm working on the same sides, I'm going to add my button that I want to add. If you want to, you can use the tails that we cut off when we did the bind off. So I have some orange. I really thought the orange would be good to pop up here instead of the green. Or I didn't know if I should have used the green, but I think I like the idea of popping the orange up here. So I just need to tie this to the loom, kind of deciding which way I want it to be. And again, you can use a crochet hook. If your bead or your button has big enough holes, you can get a crochet hook to fit in there. That's what I'm going to do. So I'm going to trim, excuse me, because I don't need all of this. I'm just going to cut it in half. I'm going to come through the project, excuse me, whereabouts I want it. I'm going to go through the button, and then I'm going to put my working yarn, here, let me zoom in here. I'm going to put my working yarn onto it. Now this is a really thin crochet hook, so it's not the best for doing this, but it will go through if you go slow. Or if you have a thinner yarn, you can do that if you don't want to use the same color. So if you got part of it, you're going to kind of try to work yourself through, even if you have to pull it through the button first, and then put it against, excuse me, pull it through the button first and then use your other one to bring it through the project. If you get what I'm trying to say here. I'm having trouble speaking today. So you're going to pull that through, and then you're going to go ahead and you're going to decide if you want it to be crisscross. You're going to bring your other crochet hook over and bring the yarn through as best you can, making sure you don't lose the tail. It's already through the project. So if you want to do it crisscross, then go ahead and go in and grab that tail. Okay, and then if you like the way that is, I'm just going to go ahead and I'm just going to tie this, and I'll use another strand to do the other side, if that makes sense. I'm going to tie here. And I know it's not how you sew a button, so if you want to do it a different way, go ahead. I'm just choosing this way for me. I'm going to do a double knot. I'm going to trim it. I'll hide that in later like we did before. Okay, and now I'm going to do the same thing with this. I can still work behind it to grab the yarn. Okay, and then I'm going to use the other crochet hook to go find it on the other side to bring it through the project. Again, you may choose to do the mint green if you want, so it matches whatever the handle's in. If you're worried about it showing obviously that it's not the same color, it's up to you. That's the one thing I like, is you can really modify things. And again, we just need to go over to this side. Pull it through. But again, if you have a yarn needle, I couldn't find mine, like the plastic needles that come with the kits sometimes, that would be a good one to use too, and you could probably actually sew it a little better on. I could not find mine at the time of this video. So I'm using my crochet hook instead, and then I'm just going to tie it. Now remember, whichever way you did it here, if you did crisscross and not straight across, you're going to want to do that on the other side. But I'm going to tie this off, and now we got our cute little button on our bag. And then again, I'm going to just weave in the ends if I need to. You know, after I make sure everything's secure, I can hide the ends in there. If you're worried that you use an alternate color, you could always take something of the same color if you want and kind of hide it in there a little more. I can use my crochet hook and I can kind of hide these stragglers into the project a little bit. Or I could have used the same color. So if you decide you don't like the idea of an opposite color peeking through, you can definitely hide it. Or you can definitely take some of the mint yarn and maybe even kind of wrap it around to hide it on the, on the opposite side if you don't want people to see that you used a different color. But I'm okay with it, because how many times is someone going to look at the inside of your bag? So I'm okay with the stragglers being on this side, and I can just kind of keep trimming them so they don't show up as much. Oops. I hope I had a better pair of scissors right now. So that's all we're going to do. Like I just wanted to put my button on this side. So now I'm going to do the same process on the other side. I'm going to pull on any loose string I need to. I'm going to tie it on. Tie it on like we did before. And then we're going to go ahead and you're going to put your button on. And the same thing with any stragglers on the inside. Go ahead and do the same thing. You can kind of tie them. If you have stragglers, you could tie them together, hide them in the project. That's pretty much what we do, is just kind of hide them away, basically. So if I, tie them a couple times, and then just trim them, and they will kind of hide inside the bag. So again, that's all I'm going to do. I'm going to just finish up this side the same way I did the other, and the bag will be complete. So as you can see right now, this is kind of an idea of how the bag is going to look. I hope you like it, and I apologize for this video being so long, but I just wanted to make sure I gave you as many pointers and was as detailed as I could. So again, we've got our nice little bag here with our little different design for the bottom, and I hope you like it. So have a great day, everyone, and I can't wait to see your finished bags. If you haven't already, make sure you hit that subscribe button and hit the bell icon to be notified of future videos. Also, if you haven't already too, make sure you check out the links in the description. There's links to the Facebook page for Simply Intertwined. Again, I do not accept requests on my personal Facebook page, so you really want to make sure you go to the Simply Intertwined Facebook page to end up following me or to ask me any questions. That's the easiest way to get a hold of me. And I'm also got a Twitter account on there too, so if you want to follow me on there. But yes, I really appreciate everyone's support, and I hope you have a great day. And make sure you go on the Simply Intertwined Facebook page and share your finished results. I love to see what colors you guys do these in, and if you've modified anything from the pattern. And again, have a great day.